You're listening to the Food Garden Life Show, the show with simple, practical, and fun ideas to help you grow food at home, whether it's on a balcony, in a backyard, or bigger. I'm your host, Stephen Biggs. Welcome to Season 9, Episode 23. Pawpaw season's nearly here, so I'm bringing back a 2021 conversation with Neal Peterson, who's sometimes called the Indiana Jones of pawpaws. Neal tasted his first pawpaw as a young man and was so taken with that fruit that it became his life's work. He dug through old records, searched for nearly forgotten varieties, and he eventually developed some of the finest pawpaw varieties that we have today. My daughter Emma joins me for this conversation with Neal, and we talk about his search for some of those lost plants, his breeding work, and what home gardeners need to know about growing pawpaws. And a quick update since we recorded this interview, Neal no longer sells trees or fruit directly, but you'll find growing information and a list of nurseries carrying Peterson pawpaw varieties at the petersonpawpaws.com website. Now, here's our conversation with Neal.
Neal, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
I'm honored. Thank you.
Neal, let's jump back to 1975 because I think that's when you tasted your very first pawpaw, and I think you instantly fell in love with them. Is that right?
Absolutely. I grew up in southern West Virginia. The woods were at my back door, and I spent a lot of time as a teenager exploring there. It just was my cup of tea because I was falling in love with the native flora. Now, I knew back then what a pawpaw tree was, but I'd never tasted the fruit. I mean, and this is not atypical because pawpaws don't bear a lot of fruit in the wild. And we'll get back to, why that is. Well, when I tasted my first fruit, and I was at West Virginia University studying plant genetics, and by that time, it's like I knew I had to taste a fruit because I'd done enough reading. And it was like, it's just an inspiration, a revelation. Pick up that first fruit. I was all by myself in the woods near the Monongahela River, and it's just like it's more than you expect. There it is. It's just a green kind of mottled skin, and it's soft. I just broke it open with my fingernails, and it's kind of smushed. It just kind of smushes out of the skin because it's soft, and it's just so flavorful with a fragrance and sweet, and a long aftertaste. I had the good fortune to be eating a good one at that moment because, in honesty, not all of them in the wild are so good, but I got a good one, and it converted me.
Okay, and for people who have never tried a pawpaw, how would you describe that flavor or the texture? What's that like?
Well, the texture is easy to describe, and the flavor is not so easy. The texture is like custard, like a custard pudding, when the fruit is totally ripe. So, when we're used to like apples are hard and crisp, and this is very different from that. The flavor is, I think most flavors are hard to describe. What would we tell a person what a apple tastes like?
Mm-hmm.
We could talk more about texture than we could flavor. What does a strawberry taste like? Well, we can say a few adjectives about pawpaw because almost everyone says, well, it tastes a bit like banana. Okay. And there'll be others who say, and I taste mango in there. And sometimes it's like, there's a little pineapple. It is a flavor all its own, just as any of those fruits we just named are flavors all their own. But you will find a similarity to banana and mango. And both of those are tropical fruits. So that, is another thing. Even though we grow up in the temperate zone, you're certainly in the temperate zone in Ontario, yet we have an idea of what a tropical taste might be, and that's pawpaw.
let me throw in there the idea of a tropical smell. And I was telling you just before we started the podcast how we had our first pawpaw harvest 2 years ago. And as they sat on the counter, I tried some when they were first picked and I left some. I was experimenting and I noticed what to me was a very tropical smell that started to come from them as they ripened.
That's absolutely right. That is just one of their, very memorable characteristics, that they have such a fragrance. It's both floral and fruity, I think. And yeah, in the woods, sometimes you might smell them before you see them because they're just green skin hanging in the tree, with the green leaves. Can be hard to spot.
It's interesting now that you mention pawpaws in the woods, because here in Toronto, I've never seen any growing in the woods. But I know where you are, it's more likely that you'll find groves of them. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, I'll mention about Toronto, and you will not find wild pawpaws according to the literature in Toronto. But where in Ontario they grow wild is close to Niagara Falls, that little region of Ontario, and the other place is close to Detroit. Would that be Windsor? What do we call the Ontario side?
Down by Windsor.
So there's Windsor. So those are two places where they occur naturally. Of course, they can be planted, but where I am, they are fond of growing near rivers and creeks where there's a slope above them and a deep, fertile soil that they're growing in. They do need drainage, so they won't be in anything swampy. But as long as they have that drainage, they form a patch. And they form a patch because the biology of the tree is such, it's one of these trees that suckers. And what comes to mind is like an aspen, a quaking aspen tree, that suckers extensively. Well, pawpaws also sucker to the point that you might encounter a half acre of trees in the understory of sycamores and tulip poplar, and they might all be related from one original tree because they've suckered at maybe every 3 to 6 feet a new sapling that shoots up from a root, a horizontal root, making a new tree. And so it goes on for year after year. It's a very interesting sort of environment to be in because the leaves are large. They're just one of the largest leaves in the eastern forest. And you get this very shady green feeling going on, almost tropical. I love it. The trunks themselves never get very big. Typically, about the size of your upper arm would be, what you could barely reach your hand around might be them. But they're very, very lanky. They, in the shade of a forest, they don't have a whole lot of side limbs, and they're just growing up towards the light. So you might be in there looking for fruit, and it's all overhead. And if you shake the tree in September, in your area, in your latitude of Toronto, you might be waiting till early October for the fruit to ripen. But at any rate, the way to get it down in that situation out there in the woods is to give some gentle shake to the tree. If anything's ripe, it'll just fall down.
Okay,
so we're talking about a fruit here that I think we could describe as tasting and smelling almost tropical, except even here in Toronto, where we're definitely not in the tropics, we can grow it. So for people at home who are curious about growing pawpaw, what are some of the main things that they should know about growing it at home?
Well, they have to have a well-drained soil. So a heavy clay soil is not ideal. By the same token, if you had pure sand, I wouldn't recommend that either. The other thing is that it needs to be moderately acid, and you might want to consider whether you're in a very windy site, which could not work. I had a friend who lives on Long Island, New York, and so it's right there along the coast, and he tried to plant a small orchard He couldn't succeed because the wind was unrelenting. And the pawpaw leaves are 12 to 14 inches long, and they just kept being, whipped by the wind. But I mean, in much of the country, the wind is not the issue. The other thing is to provide for cross-pollination, you'll need 2 trees. There may be exceptions like sunflower. This isn't well researched to know if there are some varieties that are self-pollinating, self-fertile, but for most people it's 2. And this is kind of neat because you could have that way 2 different varieties, and they each will have their different flavor profiles, and one might ripen earlier than the other and extend your harvest season. And for a backyard grower, that would be a good thing.
And I want to jump back to something we spoke about before the podcast, which was for people who don't have a lot of space. You were saying one could put the trees maybe a couple of feet apart, and
right,
that way fit 2 into a small space.
They'll be happy that way. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And and as they grow up over time, they'll just the branches will intermingle a bit, and visually it'll resemble a single tree.
What about full sun versus part sun? Because you were talking about them being an understory tree.
Right. That's a good question. They are in nature an understory tree, and for several reasons. I mean, the basic reason is the eastern U.S. is all about trees left to itself, right? And they just do not grow to be a big tree. They seldom grow more than 25 feet tall. So they find themselves relegated to life in the understory of big trees like sycamores and tulip poplar and ash and maple, on and on, these trees that grow 50, 60 or more feet tall. And they're adapted to that. But life in the understory is life with not so much sunlight. And sunlight is the food that feeds plants and so that they grow. And so in the wild, you don't find a whole lot of fruit. And lo and behold, when you move your pawpaws into full sun or part sun, up goes their production. Now they have the benefit of all that sunlight that they were deprived of in the wild. And you can have, like 5 or 6 times the production of fruit. So that's a good thing. And they're a lovely tree to look at in the landscape. They have this pyramidal shape. The trees, not the trees, but the leaves are large, like I've said, and they droop and they hang, and it kind of takes on this Christmas tree appearance. It can be very pretty. In the fall, to add to it, the leaves will turn a very butter yellow color, very pretty in addition to its other attributes. In the home, so the home gardener can, consider that the fall foliage is a plus.
And certainly in the summertime, having those large leaves in the landscape, really, they stand out because they're so distinct from the other trees in the yard.
Yes, they are. Yeah. I think you told me that your trees are growing in full sun.
Mine are in part sun. They're under a black walnut, which is a marvelous thing for me because that black walnut prevents other things from growing. So to have something that tolerates it is great.
Yeah. That is a very interesting point about pawpaws, that they are not affected by the juglone that the walnut roots secrete, and are poisonous to many things. Are poisonous to tomatoes, to apples. Probably can go down the list of many things that are not favored near a black walnut tree. But pawpaws are insensitive to that, and part shade. They'll appreciate part shade. If they get, say, a half day of sun, that's pretty much satisfies their requirement.
And I should say that with mine, I've started topping them at about 7 feet with the idea that that's as high as I want to reach to pick my pawpaws. And so far, they're making a nice shape since I've been topping them.
Yes, I do that to a few of mine, and I give them a pruning every year. they will, of course, continue to try to grow taller. There's only so much you can do to restrain that on a tree, but yes, I do annual pruning, and mine probably are no more than 8 feet tall and at least 8 feet wide. They've got a very nice shape.
And I have to note, too, that Dad said 7 feet tall, so that's just out of reach for me at the very top of the tree, and I think that's so that I can't always pick them on my own, so that he gets more.
Do you have any competition from wildlife for the fruit?
So far,
Squirrels.
no. But the word on the street is that raccoons are passionately fond of pawpaws, and maybe I was lucky. Maybe I didn't pick them. Maybe I picked them soon enough before they weren't too very fragrant. So I am mindful of that I won't leave them on the tree to become fully ripe because I know there will be competition.
Well, Emmas are passionately fond of pawpaws.
Yeah, that's right. Emma loves them too. So between Emma and the raccoons,
Okay.
I have to act fast.
Yeah, it's true. Down here, we also deal with possums that adore them.
Oh.
And we seldom have bear, but I'm sure bear would love to eat them. I think foxes eat them, but raccoons are in particular very fond of them.
We had jumped back to 1975 in your first Pawpaw, and I think we should pick up that trail a little bit because you've led the life a little bit like the Indiana Jones of Pawpaw, I think, where you've gone out and gone on these quests to find this lost Pawpaw germplasm. Can you tell us about that? It sounds really amazing.
Well, that's true. I was studying for Masters in Plant Genetics. Now, it wasn't geared to plant breeding, mind you, but it's the same. It's principles, our genetic principles. And so I knew when I decided that no one else was working with pawpaws, which I said, that's really a shame because this fruit deserves to be widely known. I didn't conceive of it. I still don't conceive of it as having the qualities for mass distribution channels. Cross country, sit on a grocery shelf for days or weeks. But it deserves attention. So I started to say, well, if I'm going to do this, where am I going to get my original pawpaw breeding stock from? And you start with the best. Whether you're breeding thoroughbred horses or dogs, you're very selective about the animals, the parents that you're going to be working with. And so it wouldn't do just to walk out into the woods and pick fruit from a few trees. And I did literature research. I was so gratified to find out that, I wasn't starting from zero on this quest, that there had been work done in the 1916 and even before to find the best pawpaws. In 1916, the Journal of Heredity advertised a contest for the best pawpaws, and they had received entries from Kansas, from a few parts of the South, Tennessee, maybe one from Mississippi. Most of the entries came from the Midwest of Illinois, Indiana, Ohio. They had some from Maryland and Pennsylvania. So this was great. They were really both shocked and surprised at how good some of the fruit was that was sent in. So I said to myself, well, what has happened? That was 1916 and 17. What has happened since then? What became of the fruits and the trees that were identified? And that's where I took off, as you were describing me, comparing me to Indiana Jones. But I guess I'm a West Virginia Jones. I just, based on the literature, went looking for, do any of these properties still exist and growing the trees? Because obviously the year by that time was about 1977. So almost 50 years had passed, That's a lot of time for a lot of change to happen. I did, though, find some stuff that was really good. And I had my disappointments in the search. For instance, Benjamin Buckland, who in 1916 had a collection of, I think, about 11 named pawpaw cultivars. He was a horticulturist and had done his own breeding, particularly of pears. But when I went out to his farm and the extension agent helped me, drive me there, he knew the property. Well, it was now corn and soybeans. That didn't turn up anything. But there was this experimental farm near Winchester, Virginia, called the Blandy Experimental Farm. And they had been in existence since 1926. And they had an interest in so many things, and they had an endowment. So they were an ongoing concern and an institution. When I tracked them down and found what they had, that was some wonderful material. It formed the basis for my best varieties. And at one time, I was growing 1,500 trees, all from seed, which is what you do when you do any breeding, whether it's plants or animals. You get parents and you get children from them, and you evaluate all the children. So I had 1,500, and I have selected. Took about 30 years. 7 trees in particular were the best out of the lot, and so I've named those and released those. And I'm very lucky to have had that type of success in this sort of quixotic journey, because when you undertake something like this, you don't have any guarantees of what you're going to find. And many experiments in science end in failure rather than success.
Well, I have to ask you, with that many trees and plants and that many years of pawpaws, do you eat them all fresh, or are there other things that you like to do with all these fresh pawpaws?
No, I'm not much of a cook. And pawpaws, there are recipes. There are more recipes than I can shake a stick at, which amazes me, because I don't think of them as innately versatile in the kitchen. I really think they're best suited for fresh eating. And cantaloupe is one of those fruits in the same category. Best you just eat cantaloupe fresh. And I imagine mangoes really are mostly fresh eating. But there are a really well-known recipe is for pawpaw nut bread. And that's fine and delicious. My complaint about it is that in baking, the end product is almost indistinguishable from banana nut bread. And of course, that's a wonderful thing. But I feel like if I'm just going to end up with banana nut bread, I'll start with bananas and not start with pawpaws. My personal favorite of a recipe for pawpaws is pawpaw ice cream. Mm-hmm. Now that has a distinctive flavor because it's not baked. Those fragrances are not driven off in the baking process, and it just combines with the cream, that goes into making ice cream. It combines very well, including making a nice smooth texture.
Well, that sounds so good.
It is so good. Now, some people have talked about making, say, a pawpaw cheesecake. Probably would be good. No one's made it for me. Pawpaw, creme brulee, some of these rather, custard-like dishes. I know that the Kentucky State University website on pawpaws has a section of recipes. So there are many recipes there.
Okay. Well, the creme brulee idea caught my attention, so I'll report back to you if we try that out. But I want to jump back to your pawpaws, because now you've bred these 7 varieties, and I'm interested to know what you've bred them for. What have you pursued as you've bred these pawpaw varieties?
Yes. Well, you're right on track with the right questions there. Because, I was commenting on what they're like in the wild, including the first one I ate. Mm-hmm. I was blown away by it, but I also said to myself, this is too seedy to make it in the market next to peaches, and many of the other fruits, right? Yeah. It's delicious, but it's chock full of seeds. And I said, what people are going to want should have fewer seeds. And it's got to be top-notch flavor, and people like size. It should be at least 8 ounces to 16 ounces in size. So, as I went through evaluating I was evaluating the size of the fruit. I was also evaluating that the tree had reasonable yields, thinking about producers now as well as consumers. For the consumer, that flavor has to be top-notch. And I would measure the weight of the fruit, separate out the seeds, clean the seeds, and weigh the seeds. And then I would have a ratio of the fruit weight to the seed weight to the fruit weight. And so my intention was I had a numerical statistic that would show me, what the lack of seeds were. And in the wild, it ranges from typically about 14% seed to 25% seed. So a quarter of the weight of the fruit can be just taken up by seed. Now, I felt that Pawpaws, if I was going to, release them and recommend them, they should have less than 8% seeds. And my best varieties like Susquehanna and Potomac have 4% seed.
Wow.
So the result is that when you cut through one of those fruits, you're almost guaranteed that you're not even going to hit a seed. Whereas you could take a wild one, no matter what direction you cut through it, you're almost always going to hit a seed. So, and they're big. I don't know. We haven't said anything about that yet, but they're almost the size of lima beans. And they're very hard. They're deep brown, chestnut brown, smooth, shiny, and very hard. They're not edible.
And the other thing that struck me was that you've been doing this breeding on your own. You're not backed by an institution, I believe. This is your thing.
This is personal. I have had help, but I've not been backed. I've not been on any institution's payroll or in their what would I say? Staff position or anything. The help I've received has been invaluable in gathering the seeds and growing them. They had to have a place to be planted, and the University of Maryland gave permission to plant, a half acre of trees, about 900 trees. And they would then maintain mowing the grass, that was fabulous. I did not have to do that. I did have to drive from Washington, D.C. to the Eastern Shore, about an hour and a half drive to get to the orchard there. But I was in charge of all the data collection and caring for the trees themselves. And then a couple of years later, there was another 600 trees that got planted in Western Maryland. And that was an hour and a half driving to the west from Washington, D.C. But and there again, they did the mowing of the grass. But I've been self-funded for this. I can't think of an institution that would take on this type of project and say, okay, a 30-year project, sure, let's do it. It's not within the realm of what they can justify. The grants that come into a university, are hoping, or structured, I should say, to, have some results, say, in 2 or 3 years, typically. Yeah. And the pawpaw seedlings aren't even mature enough to flower in that time. It takes them 7 years to reach flowering stage.
I wanted to read our listeners your variety names, but being from Toronto, I can't pronounce them all. I recognize Shenandoah.
Well, I think you ought to try, and then I'll do it.
So Shenandoah, am I right with that one?
Sure.
Susquehanna?
Yes.
Rappahannock?
Right on.
Okay. Allegheny?
Allegheny, yeah.
Allegheny, okay. Potomac?
Potomac. That's the river that flows through Washington, D.C.
Okay.
The capital of USA.
Wabash?
Wabash,
Wabash, okay. And then the last one, boy, this one looks like a tongue twister. Tallahatchie.
You got it. That's exactly what it is.
Okay.
And there's a wonderful song about Tallahatchie called Ode to Billy Joe. And I recommend it to any of your listeners who like folk music. The story of Billy Joe McAllister, who threw himself off the Tallahatchie Bridge.
The Ode to Billy Joe. Okay.
Okay. Well, I want to know a little bit about what kind of interest you're seeing in pawpaws at the moment. Are there a lot of people who are catching on to how amazing pawpaws really are?
It has, after years of languishing and neglect, uh, a bandwagon effect has taken hold, and there are now 4 Facebook groups devoted to them. Face, Pawpaw Fanatics is the biggest one. It probably has close to 4,000 followers. Then there's Pawpaw Fan Club. A lot of the followers in Pawpaw Fan Club are European, and Pawpaw Planet and Pawpaw Nation. So it's all surprising. And when people write to order, from nurseries, they're saying, "Well, what's going on? They are all sold out. All the nurseries are sold out." And I have to reply. I said, "Well, you just have to put in your reservation early. Don't wait until fall, till September to ask for a pawpaw to be shipped to you in October. You do it right now in June. Get on the list."
Okay.
And the nurseries, and the same thing is maybe not to this quite the same extent, but it's happening in Europe. And I'm very pleased to see that because it can grow in a wide swath of Europe, including, and this surprises me, including they're in Stockholm, Sweden. They're growing them successfully. And that's really far north.
That's
And the
amazing.
concern, and this is good for your growers and your listeners to know, is that the issue for pawpaws in places like Stockholm or Toronto isn't how cold the winter's going to be. They can take cold down to like minus 25 and minus 30, both Fahrenheit and Celsius. It's the issue becomes, is there enough summer heat and a long enough growing season for them to ripen their fruit?
So for people in borderline places, then some kind of microclimate would be a good idea?
That's right, a microclimate. And to concentrate on varieties that are early ripening.
And out of your varieties, which one would be an earlier one that people might want to think about?
Well, for early, I recommend Allegheny. And it seems to be that it may be self-fertile as well. We're trying to ferret that one out. But Allegheny, and the other one is Shenandoah. And Shenandoah is it's unlike all the other varieties in this regard. It's also early ripening and then has fruit all the way through the season till late in the season. And it's really high quality. It's a very mellow, light flavor compared to some of them, like Susquehanna. It's a very rich flavor and very sweet. But Susquehanna is late ripening, so it may not work for you unless you have that special microclimate.
So here in Toronto, Shenandoah or Allegheny would be 2 that be likely to have better results with.
Yeah, and it's Allegheny with a G.
Allegheny. Thank you. Okay, I will get that right.
Okay.
Now, I guess I do have another question jumping back to the seed. Because nurseries are all sold out, some people might be thinking, well, until I can buy one of these named varieties, maybe I'll grow a few seeds just to see what happens. Do you have any seed growing tips for people?
Yeah, I have to alert them to the fact that Pawpaw is a very slow germinator. And so all of our experience with growing vegetables in the garden, are out the window. It takes, under ideal conditions, it takes about 2 months for pawpaw seed to germinate. And in addition, where we store vegetable seeds dry in a little packet or in a drawer, that'll kill pawpaw seeds. They have a dormancy requirement. They have to experience a cold winter or the equivalent of a cold winter for about 3 months in order to break dormancy. Otherwise, it won't sprout. And this, of course, ecologically makes sense since where they grow in the wild, we have, freezing temperatures across most of the eastern U.S. and obviously Canada too. So either you plant the seeds in the fall where you want them to grow, and then they'll receive a natural winter, and don't let them dry out now, like clean them up, store them if you want to in a little Ziploc plastic bag, or you can store them in the refrigerator, which is just typically what I've done. I usually put a little bit of damp sphagnum moss in with them into that Ziploc plastic bag, and I put them in the refrigerator, but not the freezer, because the freezer can be too cold and freeze the seeds where the ice crystals, destroy the cells. So it's really refrigerator temperatures that do the job. And for those of you who grow from seed, just be aware that it'll take about 7 years for your seedling to be mature enough to flower, and maybe the second year it will fruit. If you buy a grafted tree, the graft is already metabolically mature, and it just needs to get a little bit bigger to flower. So they usually can bear fruit in about 4 years, cutting roughly in half the time you need to get fruit. So that's one of the reasons to recommend grafted varieties. The other reason is, with a seedling, you aren't guaranteed of what quality fruit you'll get. Will it be big, small? Will it be seedy? Will it have bitter aftertaste? All those variables are unknown when you start from seed.
And that goes back to what you were saying earlier, that not all of the pawpaws one might come across in the wild taste good.
I think all of them will be, shall we say, acceptable. And if you found yourself in the woods and really out of food, well, by all means, any of us will eat the pawpaw because it'll be pretty good. But it may not be superb.
Okay.
And that's what Emma's fallen in love with. Apparently, she loves these pawpaws because she's getting some of the best.
Oh, yeah. Ours are really, really good. I love them. Well, I want to know how we can do an even better job with our pawpaws. So let's finish up with some top tips for growers at home.
Well, keep the weeds away until the tree is really well established. Just don't let any grass or weeds grow within, say, 2 feet of the trunk. And they really enjoy a nice, leaf compost or leaf mulch on top of them. It also slowly feeds the roots as it decays. I could recommend any sort of organic fertilizer for them. By organic, I'm thinking like manures, horse manure, sheep manure. That's just going to be well loved by the pawpaw. Pruning is minimal. Probably you'll want to prune up some of those lower branches to get easier access. When the tree is truly mature, healthy tree, it won't hurt it at that point to have grass growing up to the trunk. Do not use a weed eater around the pawpaw trunk. The bark is thin, and it really doesn't take much of a impact. A lawnmower impact, a weed eater impact can kill the cambium, the living tissue right under the bark, and the following year that will be a dead spot that the bark will kind of peel away from. Oh, you'll be dealing with suckers. I should mention that it's almost guaranteed that there will be root suckers coming up some distance from the tree. If you're growing it with a lawn, then that's no problem. The root suckers are very soft and green, and a lawnmower will take them right off. Or you may be in a setting where you want to let some grow, and you could graft those over to something else as they get a little bit bigger.
Or let them grow into your own personal thicket of pawpaws.
Because it's from the roots and not from the top,
yes.
It will be different genetically. It's from the roots when they come up.
Neal, those are some great tips. And maybe we can just wrap up by getting from you your website where people who are interested can go learn more about your amazing work.
Well, the website is petersonpawpaws.com. And, our motto is eat more pawpaws.
Well, that's a great motto.
I love it. Neal, thank you for joining us on the podcast. And I can guarantee that I'll eat more pawpaws, and Emma will too if she can reach them to pick them.
Thank you so much. I have had a good time talking to you too. Keep up the good work.
You're listening to the Food Garden Life Show. I'm Stephen Biggs.